The chamber was massive and circular with lights that pulsed in colors no human eye could properly describe. 15 species sat in their designated positions around the Grand Hall of the Galactic Council. Each delegate represented civilizations that had existed for thousands of years before humans even discovered fire. The Zenthari sat in their elevated position at the head of the council, with their scaled bodies reflecting the ambient light. The Vexlori delegates remained motionless like living crystals that hummed with quiet energy. Other species filled the remaining seats, including the insectoid Planari and the gaseous Netherians who existed in contained fields. Commander Lisa Bennett stood in the center of the chamber, feeling very small and very alone. She had served as Earth's ambassador for 3 years and had never seen the council like this. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Every delegate stared at her with expressions that ranged from concern to outright hostility. She wore her dress uniform with the Earth Defense insignia on her shoulder and tried to maintain her composure despite the sinking feeling in her stomach. The Zenthari Prime Speaker raised one clawed hand and the murmuring in the chamber fell silent. His voice echoed through translation devices that made his words understandable to all species present. Humanity has become a concern that can no longer be ignored. Your species expands too quickly and takes risks that endanger established order. You refuse to follow protocols that have maintained peace for millennia. You develop weapons and technologies without proper oversight. This cannot continue. Lisa took a deep breath and stepped forward. With respect, Prime Speaker, we have followed every treaty we signed. Our expansion has been into unclaimed territories. Our research has been defensive in nature. We have contributed to galactic society in countless ways, including medical advances and infrastructure improvements. The Planari delegate clicked its mandibles in what translated as disagreement. You move too fast, human. You change too much and too quickly. Other species need time to adapt and consider. You rush forward without thought for consequences. A Vexlori elder named Crystalline Prime Vexer spoke in harmonic tones that resonated through the chamber. The humans are young and eager, which is not inherently wrong. However, their methods are disruptive to established systems. Perhaps guidance rather than expulsion would serve better. The Zenthari Prime Speaker silenced Vexer with a gesture. The vote has been called. Humanity will cease all expansion beyond the Sol system immediately. All colonies will be abandoned. All military installations will be dismantled. All research deemed dangerous by this council will be surrendered. Humanity will withdraw to their home system and accept council oversight, or face forcible removal and complete embargo. Lisa felt her heart drop. You cannot be serious. We have families on those colonies and lives built over generations. Our economy depends on the trade networks we have established. You are condemning millions of humans to uncertainty. The decision is final. You have 30 days to comply. Light years away, Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the EDS horizon, watching the stars through the main viewport. He was a career military officer who had spent 15 years protecting human interests in space. His crew worked efficiently at their stations monitoring communications and sensor data. The ship was one of the newest in the Earth Defense Fleet with advanced engines and weapon systems that made it a formidable presence. The communication officer looked up from her console. Captain, we are receiving a priority transmission from Earth Command. Put it through. The screen flickered to life, showing Admiral Kyle Preston, who looked older and more tired than Jake remembered. His face was grim as he began to speak. All fleet commanders are to receive the following orders effective immediately. The Galactic Council has voted to expel humanity from galactic society. We have 30 days to withdraw all personnel and assets to the Sol system. Begin evacuation procedures for all colonies under your jurisdiction. This is not a drill. Jake stared at the screen in disbelief. Sir, what are our rules of engagement if Council forces attempt to interfere with the evacuation? We are not engaging anyone, Captain. The President has made the decision. We leave peacefully and without conflict. Pack everything we can and bring our people home. The transmission ended, leaving Jake staring at a blank screen. His first officer, Lieutenant Amy Foster, stepped beside him with concern evident on her face. They are really doing this. After everything we have contributed, they are just throwing us out. Jake nodded slowly. Get me a channel to all colony administrators in our sector. We need to start organizing transport ships immediately. On Earth, President Helen Carter sat in the Oval Office surrounded by advisors who all seemed to be talking at once. The economic minister warned of collapse. The military chiefs demanded they fight back. The colonial representatives begged for more time. Helen listened to all of them with a calm expression that betrayed none of the anger burning inside her. She raised her hand and the room fell silent. We are not going to war with the entire Galactic Council. We are not going to beg for scraps of acceptance. We are going to do exactly what they asked. We are going home. Madam President, one advisor protested, we cannot simply abandon decades of progress. Our position in the galaxy will be destroyed. Helen stood and walked to the window looking out at the city below. Our position was already destroyed the moment they voted. Now we show them what they are losing. Send orders to all colonies. Full evacuation. Dismantle everything we can transport. Destroy anything we cannot take with us. No technology, no research, and no infrastructure gets left behind for them to use. The evacuation began within hours. On the colony world of New Terra, engineer Danny Wells supervised teams as they packed up the terraform stations. He had spent 5 years building the atmospheric processors that turned the toxic air into something breathable. Now he was taking them apart piece by piece. Colonists loaded belongings onto transport ships with children crying, and adults trying to maintain brave faces. The world they had built was being abandoned. In the medical facilities, Dr. Greg Murphy downloaded decades of research onto encrypted drives. He had worked with dozens of alien species to develop cures for diseases that affected multiple civilizations. Now all of that knowledge was being locked away. If the Council wanted humans gone, then they could solve their own medical problems. Merchant Captain Carla Hayes watched her trading post being dismantled. She had built relationships with suppliers from 6 different species. Her business had employed hundreds of humans and aliens alike. Now it was all ending because the Council decided humans were too disruptive. She felt anger mixed with sadness as she supervised the loading of the last cargo containers. Across human space, the scene repeated itself. Colonies that had existed for decades were being packed up. Military outposts that protected entire sectors were being shut down. Research stations that pushed the boundaries of science were being abandoned. Humanity was withdrawing and taking everything with them. Commander Lisa Bennett returned to Earth and went straight to meet with President Carter. The president looked at her with understanding. You tried your best, Lisa. This is not your failure. Lisa shook her head. I should have seen it coming. The signs were there. They have been growing more uncomfortable with our presence for months. Helen Carter smiled grimly. Let them be comfortable then. Let them manage without us. I think they will learn a valuable lesson about taking things for granted. The days counted down as the great exodus continued. Human ships streamed toward Earth like a reverse migration. Captain Jake Morrison coordinated the fleet movements, ensuring that every ship made it home safely. Lieutenant Amy Foster oversaw the demolition of Outpost 7, which had served as an early warning station for pirate activity. They set charges and watched as the station exploded into debris. If the Council did not want human protection, then they would not get it. On day 30, the last human vessel crossed into Sol system. Captain Jake Morrison transmitted a simple message to the galaxy. Humanity has returned home as requested. We wish you well. Then Earth closed its borders. Communication channels went dark. The quantum network nodes that had connected human space to the rest of the galaxy shut down. Trade ceased. Cultural exchange ended. It was as if humanity had simply vanished from the galactic stage. Behind the barrier of their home system, humanity began to regroup. President Helen Carter addressed the population with a message of determination. We are not defeated. We are not broken. We are simply done trying to fit into a society that does not want us. Now we build for ourselves. The Galactic Council congratulated itself on restoring order. The Zinthari held celebrations. Most species felt relief that the disruptive humans were gone. Only the Vexlori remained quietly concerned. Crystalline Prime Vexer watched the silent Sol system and wondered if they had made a terrible mistake. Time would tell if his concerns were justified. The transport ships continued arriving at Earth for weeks after the deadline. Each vessel carried colonists who had left everything behind except what they could pack in cargo holds. Engineer Danny Wells stood in the arrival terminal watching families reunite with relatives they had not seen in years. Some people cried with relief at being home while others stare. Dead Earth's sky with expressions of loss. They had built lives on distant worlds, and now those lives were erased by a council vote. Danny carried a data pad filled with technical, specifications for the terraform stations he had dismantled on New Terra. The information represented years of work and innovation that had made an uninhabitable world livable. He walked through the crowded terminal toward the transport hub, where he would catch a shuttle to the engineering division headquarters. Around him, people spoke in hushed tones about what would happen next. Nobody seemed to have answers, but everyone had questions. At the spaceport, Lieutenant Amy Foster oversaw the final decommissioning of military equipment. The weapon systems that had protected human colonies were being cataloged and stored in secure facilities. The early warning satellites that had monitored entire sectors of space were now sitting in warehouses collecting dust. She felt frustration building inside her as she signed off on another inventory list. All of this technology had kept people safe, and now it served no purpose. A young officer approached her with a tablet. "Lieutenant, we have confirmed that all outposts have been dismantled. The Council sent inspection teams to verify compliance. They found nothing but empty platforms and debris fields." Amy nodded. "Good. Let them patrol their own space now. How many ships did we lose during the withdrawal?" The officer checked his notes. 17 vessels suffered mechanical failures during transit, but all personnel were evacuated safely. No casualties reported. Small miracles. Amy looked up at the sky where ships continued to arrive in orbital patterns. Dismissed. In orbit around Earth, the EDS Horizon maintained station alongside hundreds of other military vessels. Captain Jake Morrison walked through the corridors of his ship, observing the crew as they adjusted to their new reality. The ship had been designed for long-range patrols and diplomatic missions. Now it sat idle in Earth's orbit with nowhere to go. The crew maintained their routines, but Jake could sense the uncertainty that hung over everyone. He entered the bridge where his officers monitored communications from the fleet. "Anything interesting from command?" The communications officer shook her head. "Just routine traffic, sir. Fleet assignments are being reorganized. Most ships are being placed in defensive positions around the Sol system." Jake sat in his command chair and stared at the view screen showing Earth below. "We went from protecting a dozen sectors to guarding one system. What a waste of resources," his first officer spoke quietly. "At least we are all together, sir. Better than being scattered across hostile territory." Jake knew she was right, but it did not make the situation easier to accept. The galaxy had decided humans were too dangerous or too disruptive or too something. Now humanity would focus inward and let the Council deal with their own problems. He wondered how long it would take before they realized what they had lost. On the surface, President Helen Carter met with her cabinet to discuss the transition. The economic minister presented projections showing short-term hardship but long-term stability. The military advisors outlined defensive strategies for protecting Sol system. The science director proposed redirecting all research efforts toward internal development rather than collaborative projects. Helen listened to each presentation with careful attention. When everyone had finished, she leaned forward with her hands folded on the table. "We have been given an opportunity disguised as an insult. For the first time in decades, we can develop without worrying about galactic politics or alien approval. We can innovate without restrictions. We can build without compromise. I want every department to think bigger and bolder than before." The science director raised an eyebrow. "Madam President, are you suggesting we accelerate programs that were previously considered too aggressive?" Helen smiled. "I am suggesting we stop limiting ourselves based on what makes other species comfortable. They wanted us contained in Sol system, so we will show them what humans can accomplish when we have no distractions." Across the system, construction projects began at a pace that would have alarmed the Galactic Council if they could see it. Shipyards that had been building colony transports switched to producing advanced research vessels. Laboratories that had been sharing data with alien institutions now focused exclusively on human applications. Dr. Greg Murphy found himself leading a team of scientists who were suddenly free to pursue theories that the Council had deemed too radical. He stood in his laboratory, looking at genetic sequences on multiple screens. His assistant brought him a data file containing research they had abandoned years ago due to Council regulations. Greg opened the file and began reading. The theories were sound, but required experimentation that crossed ethical boundaries established by galactic law. Now there was no galactic law to worry about, only human ethics, which were far more flexible when survival was at stake. "What do you think?" his assistant asked nervously. "Can we actually do this?" Greg nodded slowly. "Not only can we, but we should. If the Council wants us isolated, then they cannot complain about how we develop in isolation. In the merchant districts, Carla Hayes tried to salvage what remained of her trading business. Most of her inventory had been sold off during the evacuation, but she still had contacts and connections. She sat in her office reviewing messages from former business partners across the galaxy. Many expressed regret about the Council decision. Some offered to maintain unofficial trade relationships. Others simply said goodbye. One message caught her attention. It came from a Vexlori merchant she had worked with for years. The message was brief but meaningful. The Council has made an error in judgment. When they realize this, I hope humans will remember who their true friends were. Carla saved the message and made a note of the sender's name. If trade ever resumed, she would remember who had reached out during the difficult times. But for now, she needed to find work in a suddenly much smaller economy. She began drafting proposals for Earth-based supply chains that could replace the galactic networks humanity had been cut off from. Weeks turned into months, and the initial chaos of the evacuation gave way to organized reconstruction. Commander Lisa Bennett took a position in the diplomatic corps even though there was no one to negotiate with anymore. Her job now focused on internal coordination between Earth's various governments and colonies within the Sol system. It was important work but felt small compared to representing humanity before the Galactic Council. She met regularly with President Carter to discuss long-term strategy. During one meeting, Lisa voiced the question that many people were asking. How long do we maintain this isolation? Eventually, we will need to re-engage with the galaxy. Helen looked at her seriously. We re-engage when they ask us to and not before. Right now, they think they are better off without us. Let them learn otherwise. Our job is to make sure humanity thrives regardless of whether we ever speak to another alien species again. Lisa understood the logic, but wondered about the cost. Humans had always been explorers and innovators. Keeping them confined to one system went against their nature. But she also recognized that the Council had left them no choice. Either humanity adapted to isolation, or they fought a war they could not win. Adaptation seemed like the wiser choice. Meanwhile, beyond the barriers of Sol System, the Galactic Council continued their business as usual. Trade routes were rerouted to avoid the now silent human territories. Diplomatic relations shifted as species adjusted to the absence of human influence. Most council members felt satisfied that they had resolved a growing problem. The Zenthari in particular seemed pleased with themselves for taking decisive action. But Crystalline Prime Vexer of the Vexlori remained troubled. He studied reports of increasing inefficiencies in sectors that had previously benefited from human logistics support. He noted rising costs in industries that had relied on human technology. He observed growing tensions in regions where human peacekeeping forces had maintained stability. None of these concerns were dramatic enough to cause alarm, but together they painted a picture that worried him. He called a meeting with other Vexlori elders to discuss his observations. We may have acted too hastily in supporting the human expulsion. Their contributions to galactic society were more significant than we acknowledged. One elder responded with harmonic skepticism. They were disruptive and refused to follow established procedures. Order has been restored. Vexer resonated with disagreement. Order is not the same as functionality. A stable system that produces nothing is not superior to a chaotic system that generates progress. We have chosen stability, and I fear we will soon learn the true cost of that choice. The other elders did not share his concern, and the meeting ended without resolution. Vexer returned to his duties but continued monitoring the situation. He had lived long enough to recognize patterns, and the pattern he saw now reminded him of historical mistakes his species had made millennia ago, mistakes that had cost them dearly. Back on Earth, Captain Jake Morrison received new orders assigning the EDS Horizon to deep space patrol within the Sol system. It was boring work compared to his previous assignments, but he followed orders. His crew maintained readiness even though there was no enemy to fight. They ran drills and conducted exercises and waited for something to happen. Jake stood on the bridge during a routine patrol shift, looking at the edge of the system where the rest of the galaxy continued without them. Somewhere out there, alien ships traveled between stars. Somewhere councils met and trade happened and life went on, but none of it involved humans anymore. They had been removed from the game and now they could only watch from the sidelines, or so the galaxy thought. What the Galactic Council did not know was that humanity was not sitting idle behind their barriers. They were building and researching and preparing. President Carter had been very clear in her instructions. When the galaxy came knocking and she believed humans would be ready to answer on their own terms. The question was not if the Council would regret their decision, but when. 3 months had passed since the last human ship crossed into Sol system, and the galaxy was beginning to notice the absence. The Karathi Mining Consortium held an emergency meeting in their corporate headquarters on their homeworld. The board members gathered around a holographic display showing production numbers that painted a grim picture. Their mineral extraction rates had dropped by 40% across all operations. The operations director gestured at the declining graphs with one of his 4 arms. The equipment keeps breaking down and we have no one qualified to repair it. The human engineers understood these systems better than anyone. Our own technicians are trying their best, but they lack the training and experience. The financial director added her concerns. We are losing credits every day that production remains below capacity. Several contracts are in danger of default. If this continues, we face bankruptcy within the year. The board chair tried to maintain calm. Contact the manufacturers of the equipment. Surely they can send support teams. We already tried. The manufacturers licensed much of the technology from human companies. Without access to human technical documentation and expertise, they cannot provide adequate support either. On the Zenthari homeworld, a different crisis was developing. Dr. Zenthar stood in the central medical facility staring at patient reports with growing alarm. The plague had returned after lying dormant for nearly 5 years. 3 cases had been reported yesterday. Today there were 12. The infection rate suggested exponential growth within weeks. He pulled up the medical protocols that had kept the disease in check. The treatment regimen had been developed in collaboration with human researchers who understood the plague's genetic structure better than anyone. Dr. Zenthar tried accessing the detailed research files but found them encrypted. The human medical teams had locked their data before leaving, and without the encryption keys, the information was useless. His assistant entered the room carrying more patient files. The count is now at 18 confirmed cases. The traditional treatments are not working as effectively as the human protocols did. Dr. Zenthar felt panic rising. Contact the Galactic Medical Council. Tell them we need access to the human research immediately. The assistant hesitated. Sir, the humans sealed all their databases when they left. No one has access anymore. Then find a way to contact them directly. We need that information or this plague will spread across the entire planet. In the outer sectors of the galaxy, pirate activity had increased dramatically. The raiders operated with impunity in regions that had once been heavily patrolled. Merchant ships traveled in convoys for protection, but even that was not always enough. 3 vessels had been captured in the past week alone, with their crews ransomed and their cargo stolen. Plenary merchant captain named Chitterick stood on the bridge of his damaged freighter, trying to assess the situation. His ship had barely escaped a pirate ambush, but the engines were failing, and life support was compromised. He sent out distress calls knowing that help would take hours to arrive if it came at all. In the old days, human patrol ships would have responded within minutes. Their early warning systems would have detected the pirates before they could strike. Now there was nothing but empty space and delayed responses from overwhelmed Council security forces. The communication officer clicked his mandibles in distress. Captain, we are receiving multiple distress calls from other ships in the sector. The pirates are hitting everyone. Chitterick felt anger and frustration. Where are the Council defense fleets? Why is no one protecting these routes? The answer was obvious, but no one wanted to say it out loud. The Council defense fleets were stretched too thin without human support. The coordination systems that had made rapid response possible were gone. The technology that had predicted pirate movements was no longer available. The galaxy was learning what it meant to function without human efficiency. On a planetary colony world, the agricultural crisis was reaching critical levels. The colony administrator stood in the fields watching crops wither despite the workers' best efforts. The irrigation systems that human engineers had designed were failing. The soil treatment programs that had made farming possible on this world required constant monitoring and adjustment. Without human agricultural specialists, the colony faced starvation. She called a meeting with the farming supervisors. We need to contact Earth. Someone there must be willing to help us. One supervisor shook his head. Earth is not responding to any communications. They have completely isolated themselves. The Council made sure of that. Then we need to appeal to the Council for emergency aid. This colony cannot sustain itself without proper agricultural support. The Council has bigger problems right now. We are not the only colony in crisis. Food supplies are running low across multiple sectors. The human agricultural technology was being used on dozens of worlds, and now none of them are functioning properly. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session 3 months after humanity's departure. The chamber that had voted so confidently to expel the humans now buzzed with worried conversations. Representatives from affected industries and colonies filled the gallery demanding action. The economic reports painted a picture of declining trade and rising costs. The security briefings detailed increasing lawlessness in formerly safe regions. The Zenthari Prime Speaker called the session to order with visible reluctance. We gather to address the current challenges facing our member civilizations. Reports indicate widespread disruptions across multiple sectors. We must find solutions. Crystalline Prime Vexor rose to speak with harmonic tones that carried reproach. The solutions we need are currently sealed behind the barriers of Sol system. We expelled the species that provided the infrastructure we now lack. This council must acknowledge its error. The Zenthari delegate responded with irritation. We will not beg the humans to return. We will adapt and overcome these temporary difficulties. A Karathi representative stood abruptly. Temporary? Our mining operations are collapsing. Our economy depends on mineral exports. Without human engineering support, we cannot maintain production. This is not temporary. The plenary delegate added their concerns. Multiple colonies face food shortages. Human agricultural technology kept them viable. Now they struggle to survive. How many must starve before we admit we need help? The debate continued for hours with no resolution. Some delegates insisted on finding alternatives to human assistance, while others argued for immediate contact with Earth. The council remained divided and paralyzed by pride. Meanwhile, behind the silent walls of Sol system, humanity had been anything but idle. President Helen Carter toured a new shipyard facility in orbit around Mars. The construction bays stretched for kilometers in every direction, with dozens of vessels in various stages of completion. These were not the colony transports or trade ships humanity had built before. These were warships of advanced design, incorporating technologies that would have alarmed the Galactic Council. The shipyard director walked beside her, explaining the production schedule. We are ahead of schedule on the new destroyer class. The prototype will be ready for testing next month. The innovations your science teams developed have exceeded all expectations. Helen nodded with satisfaction. How many vessels can we produce per year at this rate? With current capacity, we can build 40 capital ships annually. If we expand to the Saturn facilities, that number doubles. Good. Make it happen. I want humanity ready for whatever comes next. In another facility, Dr. Greg Murphy supervised medical research that would have been impossible under council oversight. His team had made breakthroughs in cellular regeneration and disease treatment that pushed the boundaries of ethical considerations. The techniques they developed could extend human lifespans by decades or cure previously untreatable conditions. They could also be weaponized in ways that the council had specifically prohibited. His assistant reviewed the latest test results. The success rate is now at 92%. We have essentially solved the aging problem. Greg studied the data carefully. Continue testing, but keep this classified at the highest level. This kind of advancement could change everything. Engineer Danny Wells worked in a massive research complex dedicated to terraform technology. The systems he had dismantled on New Terra were being improved and enhanced. His team had discovered ways to accelerate the process by years and make it work on worlds previously considered impossible to colonize. They had also developed the reverse process, which could render a world uninhabitable within weeks if necessary. Commander Lisa Bennett reviewed intelligence reports in her office at diplomatic headquarters. Even though Earth maintained communication silence, they still monitored galactic broadcasts and intercepted transmissions. She read through summaries of the growing crisis with mixed feelings. Part of her felt vindicated that the Council was suffering consequences for their decision. Another part felt sympathy for the innocent people affected by problems they did not create. She compiled a briefing for President Carter, highlighting the most significant developments. The plague on the Zenthari homeworld was spreading rapidly. The Karathi economy was in freefall. Multiple colonies faced starvation. Pirate attacks had increased by 300%. The Galactic Council was fracturing under pressure as different factions blamed each other for the crisis. Lieutenant Amy Foster commanded a patrol squadron testing new tactical systems in the Outer Sol system. The ships under her command represented the next generation of human military technology. They were faster and more maneuverable and better armed than anything humanity had fielded before. She ran combat simulations against theoretical alien opponents, and the results were decisive. In every scenario, human forces won overwhelmingly. She transmitted her report to Fleet Command. The new systems are performing beyond specifications. If the Council thinks we will come back weakened, they are badly mistaken. Captain Jake Morrison received orders assigning the EDS Horizon to Special Operations Command. The nature of the operations remained classified, but Jake understood the implication. Humanity was preparing for scenarios that ranged from peaceful reintegration to full-scale conflict. He briefed his senior staff on the new mission parameters without revealing the specific details. We are entering a new phase. Everything we do now is preparation for an uncertain future. The galaxy expelled us thinking we were the problem. They are about to learn what happens when the solution is removed from the equation. Across human space, the message was clear. Humanity would not return as supplicants begging for readmission. When they emerged from Sol system, it would be as equals or not at all. The Council had given them time to develop without interference or restriction. They had used that time well. Now they waited to see how long it would take before the galaxy realized it needed humans. More than humans needed the galaxy. 6 months had passed since humanity withdrew into Sol system, and the Galactic Council faced the worst economic crisis in its recorded history. Trade had collapsed by 60% across all sectors. The Karathi Mining Guild officially declared bankruptcy after failing to maintain operations without human technical support. 7 colony worlds had been abandoned when their infrastructure systems failed beyond repair. The plague on the Zenthari homeworld had infected over 3 million people, with the death toll rising daily. The council chamber felt different now. Where there had once been confidence and authority, there was now desperation and blame. Representatives shouted at each other across the hall. The Zenthari Prime Speaker tried repeatedly to restore order, but his voice no longer commanded the respect it once had. His own government faced internal rebellion as citizens demanded answers about the plague that was killing thousands every week. Crystalline, Prime Vexer stood, and his harmonic tones cut through the chaos. Enough. We all know why we are here. We all know what must be done. The question is whether our pride will continue to cost lives or whether we will finally admit our mistake. The Zenthari delegate responded with anger. You would have us crawl to the humans and beg. You would have us admit weakness before a species barely old enough to understand galactic civilization. Vexer's crystalline form pulsed with restrained emotion. I would have us save billions of lives by asking for help from those we wronged. The humans did not create this crisis. We did when we expelled them. Every death from the plague is on our hands. Every bankrupt company is our responsibility. Every abandoned colony is our failure. The plenary delegate clicked in agreement. My people are starving on 3 colony worlds. Children are dying because we cannot grow food without human agricultural systems. I care nothing for pride when measured against the lives of the innocent. The debate raged for hours, but eventually the vote was called. By a narrow majority, the council agreed to send a delegation to Sol system. 3 members would make the journey, including Crystalline Prime Vexer, who volunteered despite the personal risk. If the humans refused to even speak with them, the delegation might never return. If the humans were angry enough, they might face consequences worse than silence. The delegation departed 2 days later aboard a small diplomatic vessel. Vexer stood with 2 other council members as they approached the edge of Sol system. They broadcast standard diplomatic protocols announcing their peaceful intentions. Then they waited. Hours passed with no response. The ship's sensors detected activity deep in the system, but no communications came from Earth. Finally, after 8 hours, a transmission arrived. It was audio only with no visual component. The voice belonged to Admiral Jake Morrison, and his tone was formal and cold. State your purpose, Vexer responded carefully. We are representatives of the Galactic Council. We request permission to enter Sol system for diplomatic discussions regarding the resumption of trade relationships and mutual cooperation. There was a long pause before Jake responded. Why would we want that? You expelled us. You told us we were dangerous and disruptive. We honored your wishes and removed ourselves. What has changed? The situation in the galaxy has become difficult. We acknowledge that perhaps the Council was too hasty in its decision. We wish to discuss modifications to the terms of human reintegration. Another voice joined the transmission. President Helen Carter spoke with a tone that mixed amusement and ice. No, the single word hung in the silence. Vexer tried again. Madam President, please understand that billions of lives are at stake. The plague on the Zenthari homeworld alone has killed millions. We need access to human medical research. Helen's response was measured. The research you need exists because human scientists worked for years to develop it. When you expelled us, you gave up any right to benefit from our work. You made your position clear. We are dangerous. We are uncontrollable. We are too aggressive. We agreed with your assessment. That is why we removed ourselves. We will not subject the galaxy to our problematic presence. The third delegate from the Council spoke desperately. But innocent people are dying. Surely you cannot want that. Commander Lisa Bennett joined the conversation. Do not dare lecture us about innocent people. When you forced the evacuation, you separated families and destroyed communities. People lost everything they had built over generations. Did you consider them when you voted for expulsion? Did their innocence matter to you then? Vexor tried a different approach. I understand your anger. The Council made an error in judgment. We are attempting to correct that error. We are offering human civilization full membership in the Council, equal representation and voting rights, access to all galactic territories, complete autonomy in your internal affairs. Jake Morrison responded with barely controlled anger. You offer us what should have been ours from the beginning. You offer equality after treating us as children who needed to be controlled. You offer autonomy after demanding we submit to your oversight. Your offers are meaningless because they come only from desperation, not from genuine respect. President Carter spoke again. The delegation may remain at the system boundary for 1 hour. After that time, you will depart. Do not return unless invited. This conversation is over. The transmission ended. The delegation sat in their ship in stunned silence. Vexer had expected anger, but not such complete dismissal. The humans had moved beyond wanting acceptance from the Council. They had moved beyond needing the galaxy at all. He wondered if perhaps that had been the point all along. The delegation returned to the Council and reported their failure. The reaction was predictable. Some delegates blamed the humans for being unreasonable. Others blamed the delegation for not negotiating better. A few, like Vexer, blamed themselves for creating a situation with no good solutions. The Council remained paralyzed, unable to fix the problems they had caused and unable to force the humans to help. Meanwhile, on the Zenthari homeworld, the plague continued, spreading. Dr. Zenthar worked 20-hour days trying to save as many patients as possible with inadequate tools and outdated protocols. He had watched hundreds die in the past weeks. Each death felt personal. Each life lost was a reminder of the research locked away behind human encryption. He sat in his office late one night staring at the encrypted files on his screen. Somewhere in these databases was the cure, or at least effective treatments. The knowledge existed but remained inaccessible because of political decisions made by people who would never face the consequences. He felt rage at the Council for creating this mess. He felt rage at the humans for withholding help, even as people died. Mostly he felt helpless. In the mining operations, the Karathi struggled to keep even basic functions running. Equipment that had operated flawlessly for years now broke down constantly. Production had fallen to less than 30% of previous levels. The economic ripple effects spread through interconnected industries, causing cascading failures. Kompan. Ships that depended on Karathi minerals could not get supplies. Manufacturers could not produce goods. Workers lost jobs. The prosperity that galactic trade had brought for centuries was crumbling. The pirate attacks continued, escalating in frequency and boldness. Entire trade routes had been abandoned as too dangerous. The remaining merchant vessels paid extortion fees to criminal organizations for safe passage. The Council's security forces were overwhelmed and underfunded. Without human tactical support and early warning systems, they could not effectively combat the growing lawlessness. On the Planari colony worlds, the situation grew more desperate each day. The colony administrator on one world, sent a final message to the council before ordering evacuation. We tried everything to maintain the agricultural systems, but without human expertise we have failed. The colony is no longer viable. 3,000 people are being relocated. Another dream dies because the council chose pride over practicality. Back in Sol System, humanity watched the galaxy burn. President Helen Carter received daily intelligence briefings on the deteriorating situation. She read the reports without visible emotion, though inside she felt conflicting feelings. Part of her wanted to help. Humans were not naturally cruel, and watching others suffer was difficult even when those others had wronged them. But another part of her knew that helping now would only reinforce the lesson that humans existed to solve problems for species that did not value them. She met with her advisors to discuss the long-term strategy. The science director reported that human technological advancement had accelerated beyond all projections. The military chief confirmed that defensive capabilities had increased dramatically. The economic minister showed data indicating Sol System was achieving self-sufficiency faster than anticipated. Helen listened to all the reports, then addressed the group. The galaxy is learning a hard lesson. When you take something for granted, you only recognize its value after it is gone. The council thought humans were a problem they could remove. Now they are discovering that we were actually the solution to problems they did not know they had. Commander Lisa Bennett asked the question everyone was thinking. How long do we maintain this position? At what point does our refusal to help become cruel rather than justified? Helen considered the question carefully. We maintain this position until they truly understand what they lost, not just in practical terms but in principle. They must recognize that humans deserve respect not because we are useful, but because we are equals. When they can approach us from that perspective, then we can discuss reintegration. Until then, we continue building our own future. Lieutenant Amy Foster commanded training exercises with the new fleet. The ships performed flawlessly in combat simulations. The crews were sharp and motivated. They trained as if war was imminent because in many ways it was. Nobody knew how the galaxy would respond when they finally realized humanity would not be coming to their rescue. Would they accept the new reality, or would they try to force compliance? Either way, humans would be ready. Captain Jake Morrison reviewed tactical plans in his ready room aboard the EDS Horizon. The scenarios ranged from peaceful negotiation to full-scale military conflict. Each plan accounted for different levels of council aggression and human response. Jake hoped it would not come to war, but he had learned long ago to prepare for worst-case outcomes. Dr. Greg Murphy made another breakthrough in medical research. His team had developed treatments that could potentially cure the Zenthari plague along with dozens of other diseases. The information sat in secure databases unavailable to those who needed it most. Greg felt the moral weight of that decision but understood the political necessity. Giving away such advances now would only reward the council for their mistakes. Engineer Danny Wells completed design specifications for a new class of terraform platform. The system could transform a barren world into a habitable paradise in half the time previously required. It represented the pinnacle of human engineering achievement. It also remained classified at the highest levels. When humanity eventually returned to colonization, they would do so with capabilities that would astonish the galaxy. As the 6th month drew to a close, the message from Sol System remained unchanged. Humanity had departed as requested. The galaxy had wanted them gone. Now the galaxy could learn to function without them. If that lesson came with suffering and economic collapse, then perhaps it was a lesson the council needed to learn. Sometimes the cost of wisdom is measured in consequences. 1 year after humanity's departure, the Galactic Council faced a choice between complete collapse and admitting they had been catastrophically wrong. The economic damage was beyond repair under the old system. 14 member species had experienced internal political upheaval, with several governments falling due to public anger over the crisis. The Zenthari Prime Speaker, who had led the vote for human expulsion, had been removed from office in disgrace. The plague on his homeworld had killed 8 million people before finally burning itself out through lack of hosts. The new council leadership gathered in emergency session. They were younger representatives who had opposed the expulsion from the beginning, or who had risen to power by promising to fix the mess their predecessors created. The tone in the chamber was different now. There was no pride or arrogance, only grim determination to survive. Crystalline Prime Vexer addressed the assembly. We have a new crisis approaching, that makes our current problem seem insignificant by comparison. Long-range sensors have detected the Devourers at the galaxy's edge. The chamber erupted in shocked voices. The Devourers were an extragalactic threat that appeared every 1,000 years. Ancient records described them as relentless consumers that stripped entire systems of resources and left nothing but dead worlds behind. The last time they appeared, the galaxy had barely survived even with all civilizations working together. A plenary delegate spoke with clicking urgency. How long until they reach populated space? Vexer projected tactical displays. 6 months if they maintain current speed. Our military forces are in no condition to mount an effective defense. We have lost coordination and capability. 3 scouting fleets we sent to gather intelligence were destroyed without slowing the Devourer advance. The new Xanthari representative asked the question everyone was thinking. Can we defeat them without human help? Vexer's crystalline form dimmed. No. Our projections show casualties in the billions even with optimal performance from our remaining forces. Without human tactical coordination and military technology, we will lose. The chamber fell silent as the reality sank in. They had expelled the one species that might save them, and now faced extinction because of that choice. The irony was not lost on anyone present. A Karathi delegate spoke quietly. Then we must ask them again. We must make them understand the stakes. Vexer shook his head. We already tried asking. They refused. We need to approach this differently. Not as the Council seeking assistance, but as individuals acknowledging our mistakes and appealing to human compassion. The Council voted to send Vexer alone to Sol System. No official delegation and no demands, just one representative carrying a message of truth. Vexer departed knowing he might not return. The humans had every right to refuse him and let the galaxy face the consequences of its own decisions. He broadcast his approach to Sol System and waited. This time the response came faster. Admiral Jake Morrison's voice was still cold, but he granted permission for Vexer to enter the system and proceed to Earth. Vexer felt small hope at that. Concession, the diplomatic shuttle, landed at a facility outside what had once been called Geneva. Vexer was escorted by armed guards through corridors that spoke of human advancement. The technology he observed was generations ahead of what humans had possessed a year ago. They had used their isolation to leap forward, in ways that would have alarmed the Council. If there was still a functional Council to be alarmed, he was brought to a conference room where President Helen Carter waited with Commander Lisa Bennett and several military officers. Vexer noted their expressions. No welcome and no hostility, just professional evaluation. Helen gestured to a seat. Prime Vexer, you took a risk coming here alone. Vexer settled into the chair designed for crystalline physiology. The Council no longer has the luxury of pride, Madam President. I come not as a representative of a powerful alliance, but as someone who helped make a terrible mistake and watched billions suffer for it. Helen studied him. You understand we have no obligation to help. You created this situation. Vexer resonated agreement. We did. The Council feared human ambition and innovation. We saw your rapid advancement as a threat to established order. We chose stability over progress, and we were wrong. The galaxy is paying the price for our fear. Jake Morrison leaned forward. So now you need us. The Devourers are coming, and suddenly dangerous, aggressive humans do not seem so bad. Vexer did not flinch from the accusation. That is accurate. I will not insult you by pretending otherwise. We need your help desperately, but I am not here to demand or even formally request assistance. I am here to apologize and to accept responsibility. Lisa Bennett spoke for the first time. Apologizing does not save the billions who will die if the Devourers are not stopped. No, it does not. Vexer's harmonic tones carried genuine sorrow. I watched 3 million of my neighboring species die from a plague we could have cured with human research. I watched colonies abandoned and economies destroyed. I watched the galaxy fracture because we removed the species that held it together. Nothing I say can undo that harm. Helen Carter stood and walked to the window, looking out at the mountains in the distance. You know what hurts most, Prime Vexer? We wanted to be part of the galactic community. We looked at the stars and saw potential friends and partners. We contributed everything we could because we believed in something larger than ourselves. And you threw us away because we made you uncomfortable. Vexer felt shame, which for his species manifested as a dimming of his crystalline structure. You are right. And now I ask nothing except that you know the truth. The Council was wrong. You were never the problem. You were the solution we were too blind to recognize. The room fell silent for a long moment. Helen turned back to face Vexer. How many ships do the Devourers have? The tactical reports estimate 500 capital vessels and countless smaller craft. They have already destroyed everything in their path. Helen looked at her military advisors. Assessment. Jake Morrison pulled up tactical displays. With our current fleet, we can field 200 capital ships. Our technology is superior, but we would be outnumbered. Conventional engagement would result in heavy casualties. However, we have developed some unconventional approaches that might work. Helen nodded slowly. We have 6 months to prepare. Prime Vexer, you will return to the Council with a message. Humanity will defend the galaxy not because the Council asked, but because innocent people need protection. We do not do this for you. We do this because it is right. Vexer felt hope for the first time in months. What are your terms for returning to galactic society? Helen smiled grimly. We will discuss terms after the crisis is resolved. First we save everyone. Then we talk about how this galaxy will function going forward. But I will tell you now that humans will never again accept being treated as anything less than full equals. The preparations began immediately. Admiral Jake Morrison took command of the largest human fleet ever assembled. The EDS Horizon led a battle group of advanced warships that represented the pinnacle of human engineering. Lieutenant Amy Foster commanded a squadron of fast attack craft designed for hit-and-run tactics. Captain Carla Hayes volunteered her merchant vessel, which had been retrofitted with medical facilities to serve as a mobile hospital. Dr. Greg Murphy prepared emergency medical protocols for treating wounded from multiple species. The data he had kept encrypted for a year was now being shared freely to save lives. Engineer Danny Wells worked with Council technicians to upgrade their defensive installations with human technology. The collaboration was awkward at first, but necessity broke down the remaining barriers. Commander Lisa Bennett served as liaison between human forces and Council military. She coordinated operations across dozens of species who were learning to work together again under crisis conditions. The command structure that had fallen apart during human absence was being rebuilt with human expertise. The human fleet departed Sol system, and the galaxy watched in amazement. The ships were faster and more powerful than anything humans had fielded before. The tactical coordination was flawless. Species that had celebrated human departure now cheered their return. When the fleet arrived at the defensive lines the Council forces had established, Jake Morrison assessed the situation. The formations were weak and the weapons were outdated. He immediately began reorganizing the defenses with human ships at critical points. The Council admirals who might have resented his authority 6 months ago now followed his orders without question. The Devourers arrived exactly on schedule. Their ships emerged from deep space like a dark wave sweeping toward the galaxy. The initial contact was brutal. The Devourer weapons tore through Council vessels that had not been upgraded with human defensive technology. But the human ships held their positions and returned fire with devastating effect. The battle lasted 3 weeks. Human tactical innovation turned the tide repeatedly when conventional strategies failed. Lieutenant Amy Foster led daring raids that destroyed Devourer supply lines. Captain Carla Hayes treated thousands of wounded from dozens of species in her makeshift hospital ship. Dr. Greg Murphy worked without rest to develop treatments for new types of injuries. The cost was terrible. Humanity lost 37 ships and 11,000 personnel. Council forces lost hundreds of vessels and casualties numbered in the hundreds of thousands. But they won. The last Devourer ship fell to combined fire from human and Vexlori vessels fighting side by side. In the aftermath, Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the damaged EDS Horizon looking at the debris field that stretched across space. Commander Lisa Bennett joined him with exhaustion evident in every movement. We saved them, she said quietly. Jake nodded. We did, now comes the hard part. Building something better from the wreckage. The Galactic Council convened in a temporary facility, since their main chamber had been damaged in a Devourer raid. Every species sent representatives, including humans. President Helen Carter addressed the assembly with Admiral Morrison and Commander Bennett at her side. The galaxy has learned what happens when fear drives decisions. You expelled humanity because we made you uncomfortable. That choice nearly cost you everything. We returned not because you deserved our help, but because innocent people needed protection. Now we must decide how to move forward. Crystal and Prime Vexer spoke on behalf of the Council. We propose fundamental restructuring. No more hierarchy with ancient species controlling younger ones. True partnership with all civilizations as equals. Humanity will have full council membership and veto power over decisions that affect your people. Helen considered this. That is a start, but not enough. This galaxy needs to value innovation over tradition. It needs to embrace change rather than fear it. It needs to recognize that being different is not the same as being dangerous. The new Xanthari representative stood. We agree. The old council failed because it prioritized order over progress. We propose that humanity lead the effort to create new governance structures that serve all species fairly. Over the following months, the galaxy rebuilt with humans playing a central role. The council was restructured around principles of equality and mutual respect. Trade networks were re-established with human logistics coordination. Defense forces were reorganized under joint command. Medical research became collaborative again with humans sharing their advances freely. On Earth, President Helen Carter walked through the memorial garden dedicated to those who died defending the galaxy. She thought about the year humanity spent isolated and wondered if perhaps it had been necessary. The galaxy had needed to learn what it lost. Humans had needed to learn their own strength. Admiral Jake Morrison commanded patrol routes that protected multiple sectors once again. The EDS Horizon had been repaired and upgraded, serving as flagship for joint human and council operations. Lieutenant Amy Foster trained mixed species squadrons in human tactics. Captain Carla Hayes ran profitable trade routes across the galaxy. Dr. Greg Murphy collaborated with alien researchers on projects that would benefit everyone. Commander Lisa Bennett served as Earth's permanent representative to the reorganized council. She watched debates where humans and aliens worked together as genuine partners. It was not perfect, and there were still tensions, but it was better than before. Years later and old, Vex Lori, named Crystalline Prime Vexer, met with President Carter in a garden on Earth. They had become unlikely friends, united by shared experiences of failure and redemption. Did we truly learn the lesson? Vexer asked. Helen smiled. You learned that you need us. That is important, but not complete. The real lesson is that the galaxy is stronger when it embraces all its members, including the ones who challenged the status quo. Humanity departed and you repented. Now we build something neither of us could have achieved alone. Vexer resonated with harmonics that expressed hope. The future is uncertain, but for the first time in a long time I believe it will be better than the past. Helen looked up at the stars where human and alien ships traveled together, protecting a galaxy that had learned the value of those who dare to be different. The future was indeed uncertain, but it belonged to all of them now. Together they would face whatever challenges came, knowing that unity built on respect was stronger than unity built on fear. And humanity would never again let anyone make them feel like they did not belong among the stars.